we unknowingly created a mismatch between the machine and the capabilities of the people operating the machine. And the consequence is that everybody concerned, the airlines, the Boeing, the F.A.A., is turning over every rock to figure out where did the process go wrong. This process, you got to keep in mind, has produced an almost impeccable aviation safety record, and the public deserves an impeccable safety record. And so now we've got a lot of confusion about just exactly what went wrong, and I think that's what this new committee is going to try and sort out.
What do you think went wrong along the way? Was there a point where we were stretched
Becky,
too thin?
I honestly, I really don't know. I think, as you point out, there's been a lot of speculation out there, and in all aviation accidents, what we eventually find out is that the first conclusion we leaped to is wrong. Now, and in this case, I don't know whether the authorization of the FAA allowing Boeing's people to handle certification is any part of this problem or not. You have to keep in mind, I think, that Boeing's people are highly qualified. In many cases, and Boeing, of course, has many resources that the FAA does not have. And in some sense, when they subcontract the work out to Boeing, they're subcontracting it out to people that are likely to understand the subject better than the individuals involved at the FAA. Mm-hmm. Likewise, if you talk to Congress and you say to Congress, look, you guys have not provided the kinds of resources that the FAA would need to be technically competitive, mm-hmm. and they will grant you the point. So somewhere along the way, we're gonna find out just exactly what we should have done to make sure that this process didn't go off the rails, and hopefully at that point we will not do it again.
Hey, Bob, let me back up and be a little more specific about the plane itself and some of the processes that have come out. You're right, we've heard a lot of speculation, but let me tell you about a couple of the pieces of that speculation that concern me more than others. The first would be that this seemed like it was a very different jet. Engines were placed in a different location. It did not go to the airlines, and the airlines were not told that they had to retrain their pilots on that. Do you think that was a mistake?
Becky, I honestly don't know. I've talked to a whole lot of pilots,
yeah.
A number of pilots, all of whom have said to me that they think that virtually any pilot flying for a U.S. airline would have managed their way out of the crisis and not had a crash. Now, I don't know whether that's accurate or not, but I do know that that's what pilots have said to me, and I also know that when Boeing had some pilots in the simulator last week, they found their way through this process.
Right.
Now, and I also know, and I think everybody else knows as well, that training for pilots in the United States is considerably more rigorous than is true in other countries.
Right.
Now, so one of the questions that these people thinking about this are going to have to consider is whether or not Boeing made some assumptions about the skill set of pilots that were unjustified with respect to all pilots everywhere.
Sure.
And that may be part of the process of what went wrong here. That we have to make some assumptions about pilot experience that is different from what has been true in the past.
That's a really good point, and it's not one that I've heard raised this week to that point.
Well, then, and just let me just add this thought. We still force pilots to stop flying when they're 65. So we are driving thousands of very experienced people out of the cockpit on terms that I think are completely unreasonable. I think you can certainly allow people to fly well beyond 65. I'm 83 these days, and I still feel pretty good.
I mean, is there a mainstream Democratic candidate that's not 78? I mean, I don't understand that, Bob. I know it's very important for a pilot, but it seems like
important for the president.
President's a pretty important job.
Look, of course I agree with you. I think,
or Republican for that matter. President Trump's 71 or 72, I think, right? Yeah.
I think moving towards younger people in senior leadership positions is important, and I think But I also think that allowing experienced people to continue to work is a good thing.
Bob, let me ask you counterfactual. If you were the CEO of American again, what would you need to bring back the 737 MAX into service? What would you need in terms of hearing from Boeing, hearing from the authorities, and also hearing from your customers? What would it take to bring it back?
Well, what it would take, the first thing it would take, the very first thing it would take is I would have to have the senior pilot of American Airlines and the senior pilots that run the union at American Airlines. I want them to walk into my office and say, we individually and collectively believe this airplane is safe to fly. I would also simultaneously, I'd want to have that same assurance from the F.A.A. and from Boeing. And when all of those three groups came into my office and said to me, we believe this airplane is safe to fly, then I would say, fine, I'm persuaded.
And your customers, would you worry about?
I think to some extent, I think to a very considerable extent, our customers have got to depend on the FAA, the manufacturer, and the airline to tell them that an individual customer isn't very well qualified to determine whether an airplane is safe. They have to depend on us, and we have to be reliable for them.